Now that you understand how ray tracing works, we can take a look at optimizing the ray trace engine so that we will not get excessive render times, because you will find if you have a lot of objects that reflect or refract bending light, this is going to cause your render times to be very, very long. So you want to have control over this. You don't want it to be in control. You want to take the reins here. So we want to prevent unnecessary calculations from being performed. So in the case of reflective objects, you'll see here we've got reflective objects appearing in the reflections of other objects. And that's fine, and that's what we want here, because that's realistic. But we don't want that to go on forever. In other words, we don't want to have a hall of mirrors effect where a ray is bouncing back and forth here infinite number of times, or even tens of times. Even that is just going to be excessive, and we won't be able to see it on the screen anyway. So that's when limiting the trace depth comes into play. You'll see at the bottom of the rendered frame window a section here that says Trace Bounces Limits. And this is where you can set limits on the number of times a ray can bounce. You'll see the default for reflections is 4, and that's actually probably more than we need in most cases. I'm going to see what happens if I bring this down to 2. And I'm also going to just clone this rendered frame window so we'll have something to compare it to. This is max reflections set to 4, which is the default, and now I'm going to render it with max reflections set to 2. And you'll see it looks very, very similar. There's one little black spot here, one little fly in the ointment, but you know what? Our viewers might not even notice that. So it might be okay. We might be able to get away with this. So a ray strikes a surface, bounces once, bounces twice, the end. And that's going to be much faster render than 4 reflections over here. So a value of 2 might be good enough. Now if I bring this down even further, let's say I bring it down to 1 and render again, we're going to see very obvious change here, big black spots. So that's a symptom of the trace depth being set too low, or the number of max reflections being set too low in this case. So I recommend that the max reflections should be set to 2, or the default is 4. We also have here refractions, that has to do with transparent objects and light bending through surfaces. And usually you can set this a little bit lower too. I often set it to 4, and that's usually good enough. Now there's one other thing I want to show you, which is in the render setup window. I can access that render setup window just by clicking on this shortcut button here. And in the Renderer tab, if I scroll down, you will see the same values here, max reflections and max refractions, but you will also see max trace depth. That's a limit on the total number of rays for both reflections and refractions. So your rule of thumb here is that the max trace depth should be equal to the number of max reflections plus the number of max refractions. And what we have here is just about optimized for the particular scene that we have. So now that you understand how trace depth works and the number of max reflections and refractions work, then you'll be able to tune these settings to get faster render times and not have to wait as long and get good results.